Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Matt Gooding. I'm the managing editor of Tech Monitor, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this exclusive webinar discussion that we're having today, which we're running in partnership with Sage, and it's entitled Financial Closing and the Freedom of Automation. So in this webinar, we're going to be discussing the behaviours, attitudes, and ambitions of over 1,000 professionals who have been surveyed by Sage, and we're going to take a closer look at the future of the financial close. So I think what we'd like to do is, when you go away from this discussion, that you'll have a greater understanding of how businesses are getting insights faster using automation, and where companies that have automated are focusing their time and attention, as well as the role of cloud accounting software in achieving sort of greater levels of automation and greater levels of efficiency. To help me discuss this, I've got three expert speakers who are going to dig into these topics a little bit in more detail. So first of all, we have Marvin Fletcher Rogers, who's industry principal consultant at Sage. Hi, Marvin.
Good morning.
Good morning. And alongside Marvin, we have Simone Goodman, who's the CFO for Forecast. Hi, Simone.
Hi, Matt.
And last but not least, we have Becky Glover, who's the Finance Director and a board member at U-Tree Insurance. Hi, Becky.
Hi, Matt.
Hi. So I'm just going to get you guys to introduce yourselves so the audience have a little bit more of an idea about what your job roles and responsibilities are. So if we go in reverse order, Becky, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So my name is Becky Glover. As was said before, I'm the Finance Director for U-Tree Insurance, and they provide business insurance for a wide variety of industries, everything from media to haulage. They sort of do it all. So, yeah, I'm a qualified accountant. I've worked in both practice and industry, and over the last few years, automation, AI, tech in accounting has really taken my imagination. Absolutely love it. I've implemented it in some previous employments too. So yeah, really excited to see this report. Obviously, 1,000 people have been sort of questioned on it, and it's fascinating to see what's come out of it. So really looking forward to discussing it a little bit more with you today.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, we're excited to get the benefit of your experience in this area. So if I move over to Simone now, perhaps you could tell me a bit about your work and what you do at Forecast.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So Forecast is an AI native platform for resource and project management, and I'm the CFO here, so I look after the entire J&A function, including finance. I started my career training with EY, so much like Becky, chartered accountant, and then migrated into working with VC-backed technology companies, which is super exciting. And so, I really love the gains that the whole industry has made with automation, and it's just happening at an even accelerated pace. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, really exciting time of change in your industry, as it is for many other industries, I'm sure. And if I can just return to you, Marvin, perhaps you could tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Sage.
Sure, thanks, Matt. Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, I'm an industry principal here at Sage. So Sage, for those who don't know, supports organizations from startups right through to the enterprise across a suite of business applications, including finance, HR, and payroll. My particular focus within Sage is within what we define as our medium segment, which supports organizations from growth stage right throughout the mid-market. And I've been fortunate enough as a result to engage with the majority of our scaling technology organizations across a wide variety of digital transformation projects, largely centered around finance and improving the finance function. Prior to Sage, I worked in similar environments, but across slightly different organizations, the likes of Freshworks, NetSuite, and Oracle, really, again, focused on supporting clients through different types of technology transformation projects across CRM, ERP or finance systems, reporting systems, and project management systems. So hopefully I can bring a little bit of not just what's in the literature in this particular research, but also that engagement within clients and what we've seen, certainly as people approach these technology journeys.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got, as you can hear, folks, we've got a wide range of experience on this panel, and I'm looking forward to digging into the topics which feature in the closed book survey. So I think before we get started on the discussion, it'd be good, Marvin, perhaps you can introduce the survey a bit for us, tell us a bit about it, who's been surveyed, and what some of the key points are.
Sure, absolutely. So I think, as you alluded to earlier, this survey it's one of our most recent pieces of publications that we've sent out. We really surveyed 1,000 finance professionals, including a number of different finance leaders within that, across a wide variety of organizations, up to what we define as the mid-market, which in this case is up to 5 employees, so quite a large range of organizations. And the whole idea was really to understand, predominantly centered around month end and closing the books, and what the biggest obstacles, what the biggest challenges were, what the common struggles were in closing the books. And then actually, because of a wide variety of organizations of different sizes in different industries, it was really interesting to see the patterns around, certainly, so respondents were asked things around the biggest challenges of the month end, but also how they felt from a comfort level in terms of managing things like their current scale, their headcount, their kind of transformation journeys. So it's quite interesting to see the patterns across companies of certain sizes and certain industries, and functions that are partway through that journey, and seeing some of the quick wins and some of the value points that have come out of it. I think, unsurprisingly, there were some patterns within some of the more core operational challenges in terms of what was discovered or as considered as a real pain. The top 3 were actually quite operationally geared, so things around adjustments, reconciliations of sorts, which typically comes from using different systems across the entire chain, and then as a result also a lot of manual intervention to try and scan for anomalies on that basis. So probably not too surprising that the bulk of the things that are holding up month end are actually things that you would say are kind of very operationally geared. What's really interesting is that actually this was across a wide range of finance professionals and leaders. So even I think we had 40% of those respondents were either CFOs or finance exec, and even which you wouldn't really naturally expect some of the operational stuff to kind of bring out as true, but even still, these still came up as the big pieces. And again, it touches onto what I'm sure inevitably will be the topic of discussion today, which is the value behind automating some of these processes and the value behind kind of managing this standard pieces, just to save people time, and then actually hopefully repurpose that time into a slightly more value-added projects. And we'll see, as we kind of discussed today, we'll see that as those organizations that were a little bit further up the curve that have automated certain processes, we're really seeing some very significant quick wins that have come through as a business, and we'll touch on some of the advantages of that as well. I think the key thing to kind of this that really centered around the report, not just beyond the month end piece, is that there's an undercurrent of probably 3 huge industry challenges at the minute that kind of goes alongside these. The first, if you think about these processes and how manual they are, one of the biggest challenges that this comes with and is offset by is a duplication of effort, and potentially as organizations are doing multiple things in multiple systems and spending a lot of time, that was creating 2 types of challenges: the challenge in the time that's taken to do things and the errors that come with it, but also probably from a staffing perspective, it's probably a wider macro industry challenge. There are some effects of this on things like headcount and actually people working within kind of fulfillment environments. The second piece is also thinking or looking at the whole technology piece, and cloud adoption does, as you mentioned earlier, come into this. The second piece was where cloud adoption comes in, and actually where those that have automated some of the additional inherent benefits and byproducts, also co-products that have come with that, have been presented. So really keen to kind of dig into a little bit of not just the detail of the literature, but also the experience that the folks in the call have had, and hopefully share some of the things that we see when we engage with customers daily, somewhere on this journey, on that digital transformation journey.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good overview, Marvin. Thank you. I think it'd be good to ask you, Simone and Becky, first of all, sort of what your general response are to the sort of points Marvin's made there, and sort of any kind of trends you're seeing. I mean, you mentioned there about a bit, the sort of the perils of having a lot of manual processes, that you can have a bit of repetition, or you can have teams working in different silos, who may be repeating work and not working as efficiently as they could. I mean, what are the sort of trends you're seeing in the industry in this area that maybe are or aren't reflected in the report? Maybe I could go to you first, Simone.
Yeah, no, I think it's correct that anything that's routine and transactional is a target for automation. And a lot of those pain points that Marvin mentioned go hand in hand. So, staffing challenges, yeah, big challenge. And the best way to avoid staffing challenges is actually to retain your top performers, right? And I think one way to do that is to automate the work that's not as interesting or challenging to them. And then they have space to grow within your organization rather than leaving. And particularly at the lower levels, there's quite an impetus for them to jump, to go and do something new and exciting. So if you can create that new and exciting within your organization, you start building a very strong, deeply experienced team that knows the business and the other players in the business. And I think that's really powerful. And you can only get that from automation. No one wants to do routine transactions over and over again on an endless loop. And then I think the second thing is it's scalable. So if you want to grow your business, you have to have automation such that you can do something as easily when it's 1,000 transactions as when it's 10.
Yeah, definitely. That's being able to scale up like that's really, really important, isn't it? So you can sort of be agile and stuff. Becky, what are your reflections and sort of general trends you're seeing in the industry in this area, and sort of following up on what Marvin's saying there in the introduction?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Simone was saying. I think currently in the UK, obviously wider globally as well, but especially in the UK, staff challenges are up there as one of the main things that I'm hearing constantly and have, sort of seen as well. So we are training accountants in quite a traditional way. I mean, I'm on the board of AAT and I'm on a corporate panel for ACCA, and it's definitely something that comes up, is that there maybe is this kind of gap between how we're still training our accountants and then what we expect them to do kind of in the real world. So there's a little bit of a challenge there of who are you going to recruit and who's kind of got the personal passion to go into this sort of tech side of things. But I think it's really interesting, and people who sort of come into this finance accountancy space are thinking of it still as quite a traditional mindset. And then when they come in and they realize, actually, we're now using AI and computer learning to do quite a lot of this for us, it's all of a sudden really exciting for them, because then they can be freed up to not just be posting transactions, as Simone said. It's wider business think, and then you can start to get some of the sort of business partner element to their roles. And I think that's what people really enjoy, is now taking away all of that sort of mundane task, which is what these softwares can do for you, into thinking about, right, well, what's the kind of macro going on here, and how can we bring that into our particular business and drive that forward with data and analytics. So yeah, I wasn't really surprised with the sort of insights that came out. I think, yeah, the boring stuff, the bank recs, the journals, definitely everyone wants to take that away now and speed it up also for month-end close and things. But yeah, take that and make their employees really happy and growing with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the promise of AI, isn't it? It gives you more time to focus on the bits of your job that you like, and maybe not all the stuff that goes around that. But clearly, finance is suffering from staff shortages in the same way that many other sectors are, and the challenges of recruitment are something which we cover a lot on Tech Monitor for tech and business roles. I guess the way that technology can address these shortages, or the ways that it can address it, are kind of myriad. I'd be interested to know what you guys are seeing and what you're doing in your organizations to I guess either do more with less, or kind of address the sort of the recruitment challenges you've got. I mean, I assume that technology is enabling hybrid work as it is in many other spheres of work. So perhaps if I go back to you, Simone, you could kind of elaborate on that. How is sort of automation and technology helping you sort of address kind of recruitment challenge?
Yeah, very much so. So actually, one of the biggest pain points that my team has had in previous companies with previous software is revenue reconciliation, so on subscription management of contracts. And it was one of the first things we did when we joined Forecast is implement Sage Intacct, which has like a beautifully automated system for revenue reconciliation. So it talks directly to Salesforce, which is where we can focus on making sure the quality of the data is accurate, so that you've got data that you use for multiple purposes. And whereas, my team used to spend upwards of 2-3 days doing a rev rec every month, and then at the quarter and year end it was an absolute nightmare. And again, something that none of them enjoyed. At one point the Excel sheets just got too large. So that's the biggest game changer for us that Sage Intacct was able to provide, and they're actually well positioned in the market and much better than the competitors. And I'm not just saying that because Marvin's on the call, it's very true.
Yeah, Marvin, you can send Simone a tenner later on. That's really interesting. If I can go across to you, Becky, I was quite interested by what you said earlier about, when you show staff what these software packages can do, it's, it gets really excited and really engaged. Are you seeing when you're recruiting maybe trainees or graduates, are they sort of prepared for the kind of, the automated world that we're in now, or do you think, is it still quite that sort of traditional mindset and they're quite surprised by, all the different things which you've got to aid their work?
Yeah, I think the younger generation expect tech. I don't even think it's much of a thought process for them. I think they just expect it to work, expect it to be, really clever at what it does. So I think there is a danger there where if you're bringing someone that's in that sort of younger generation into a workforce that's still quite manual or a little bit clunky, a little bit slow, they can get quite bored. And I've heard stories of people going through training contracts. So, from AAT, ACCA, that sort of thing, it's a few years. So say, for example, ACCA, 3 years, for example. And I've heard stories of people, trainees moving 3 times in that 3-year training contract because they can. There's so much demand for the staff. They're getting more and more money each time. And, if something's more exciting, why wouldn't you ditch the kind of mundane traditional practice side to go and work for someone that really wants to excel in that tech side that these younger generations are just used to and expect. So I think it's really interesting that I think more of the traditional companies are seeing they need to change if they want to recruit and retain people. And it's really expensive to recruit people. It takes a lot of time, recruiters' fees. So for the wider business, it is so much better to get someone in that's really good and then to keep them for a long period of time. I think it's just an expectation that they have now. And if you're not sort of hitting that expectation, well, they can go somewhere else really easily. So why wouldn't they?
Yeah, definitely. And you've got that sort of, these are the skills they're going to need. If you're at the start of your career, these are the skills you're going to need in abundance over the next 20-30 years, right? So again, why wouldn't you want to stay with a company who's going to invest in you that way? Marvin, if I can go back across to you, any reflections on this area that you wanted to add, following on from what Simone and Becky have been saying?
Yeah, again, very similar, unsurprising, very similar story. I think so. In terms of my engagement, because I'm focused on high growth software and technology companies, there tends to be a bit of a pattern around some of the kind of key challenges that either leads them to a position where they actually need to choose to or need to invest in technology to kind of scale their organization. I think ultimately, certainly in the case of really hyper growth organizations, as they initially start out, and you've probably got everyone working within the same office, and there's almost everyone's bought into, across different functions, everyone's bought into the the mission of the organization. Actually, you can almost trust everyone to wear multiple hats and do what's right for the business at any given moment in time. There's a lot of engagement. As those organizations scale, they tend to create particular functions and particular dedicated kind of areas, and that naturally creates some silos. And those silos almost give rise to a lot of the reconciliations. It's I need to make sure system A, system B, and system C across my sales, my delivery, my finance function are all seeing the same version of the same number. And quite often the natural knee-jerk reaction is Excel, because you can chuck it in there and do a lot of the stuff, which obviously, as Simone mentioned, that gets to a certain point where that's just not scalable. And again, the symptom that we see that really gets people to kind of invest in technology isn't necessarily always just that we're spending too long in Excel and we're potentially going to have another kind of head to chuck at this problem. Is actually the reporting there just there's no reliability in the information that's being reported, and as a result, it almost feels like we're spending more time just verifying the numbers. And I think if we think about one of the pieces, checking anomalous transactions is something that you have to do when the information is governed in a certain way. So I think one of the big patterns we see is the big need is we need people to be able to trust the numbers that we're providing them, and we need to provide those numbers often and get a very clear view of that picture. And then there's no real trust because everything's so manual. There's no real trust in the process. So the really interesting thing, if we think about from a staffing perspective, is no one really gets out of bed to do reconciliations and actually review transactions. It's just such kind of tactical, low value work that can actually be automated. So by automating that, you close the books faster and you get the reports that you need, but also you almost remove that problem of trying to hire and retain staff to punch in and key in numbers and check whether numbers make sense. And even if you think about a newly trained kind of accountant, that's quite an expensive or a misuse of a resource of highly intelligent individuals to do what is actually quite laborious, manual, mundane tasks. So I think it's interesting that automation kind of solves those two problems. It makes life easier, but it also probably makes roles a bit more fulfilled, and gives people time to do some slightly more interesting things that you probably would get out of bed for on that basis. So yeah, I completely agree with those points.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure this if you can accentuate the interesting bits of people's role, that is obviously going to have a massive benefit in staff retention and even recruitment in the first place. I wonder what sort of ancillary skills you're seeing your finance teams develop to help with this, because clearly we're seeing the value of automation in the finance process, as we've talked about already. And I think we saw in the survey that respondents from more automated businesses were able to spend sort of 50% of their month-end time on those sort of value-added business analysis tasks that we've been talking about. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear from you guys. I might go back to you, Becky, first on this one. What sort of different sort of tech-aligned skills your teams have developed, and how that sort of how you've seen that process go in your roles that you've worked in the industry.
Yeah, I think it's interesting if we go back to sort of the industry as a whole. I do think that mostly we are now coming out as the back office function, and we're sitting more in the front of the office, if you get what I mean. So I think less and less, I mean, it's still there, but less and less people are referring to accountants as the number crunchers, or, just doing the reporting or the stuff that has to be done, statutory stuff. I think now people are starting to look at the finance function and accountants as people driving the business. So being at the front of that business and sort of saying, right, this is the data we've got. This is what we're seeing. Here are the trends. So as part of automating, you release people really from doing these boring tasks to them being able to look at, right, how is that actual whole business, you look at it holistically, doing, and where are we going, and what do we want to do? So this is giving people time and freeing them up to say, right, guys, this is where we need to go. Like, I found this trend that we probably wouldn't have seen before because I was too busy reconciling revenue or whatever it might have been. So yeah, I'm seeing a load of different sort of stuff coming out of this, but mainly the fact that accountants aren't just accountants anymore. They're being like proper business partners, and they're being a bit more valuable in the scaling up and the moving forward of the businesses.
And definitely, and that's really interesting. That really reflects our sort of reporting on Tech Monitor, where we're seeing a lot of business teams and tech teams kind of merging in and working a bit more in sync because of the tools which are available now, which make it a lot easier for people who are not necessarily from a tech background to understand what's going on across the whole business. And I guess that helps to avoid the kind of siloing and things like that we were talking about earlier in the repetition of tasks. Simone, I mean, does what Becky's saying there chime with what you're seeing in your work and with the teams that you work with?
Very much agree with Becky, and actually business partnering is at the forefront of both what the finance team enjoy and are increasingly getting better and better at doing, and also what the business needs. So the numbers are a little bit meaningless if they're just produced for auditors and the like. From a compliance perspective, that won't steer the ship, right? So you need to be able to collate the numbers and understand them and share them back, align them to the strategic vision of the business, and then provide feedback as to how it's going. And particularly, I would say that investors, both public and certainly on the VC side, are now more geared towards a path to profitability, if not profitability itself, which means that OPEX is increasingly, an area of focus, whereas I would have said 18 months, 2 years ago, it was just all about hitting the top line. And we know that the market goes through little frothy bubbles and then it comes back, and we, focus on ROI and doing everything sensible that accountants like becomes kind of sexy again. And so I think from that perspective, what you need to be able to provide is information that's shared in a way that's digestible from non-finance people, and the timeliness is really critical. You can't share information, on week 2 or 3 of a month and expect that your next month is going to show improvements from something they did wrong up to 7 weeks ago. And that's where automation really, really helps. You can get those numbers out as quickly as possible for the purpose of really, really driving business behavior and commercial success.
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of speed that you can have all that stuff at your fingertips must be super helpful compared to previous times. Marvin, would you be able to come in on this topic as well? Do you see that sort of merging of the sort of front and back office as something which is a key development for the industry?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think pretty much everything. Everyone's just echo the comments everyone's made, because firstly, if we think about the skills that I think you mentioned, Matt, that's actually consistent with not just the findings of this report, but also a series of reports that we've researched that we've published just on the future of finance in the office of CFO and those components. And actually, there is this idea. That'd be good to understand actually if you're seeing that from your vantage points, Becky and Simone. But there's this idea that those kind of conventional kind of bookkeeping tasks and the conventional thought around the skills that are required from a finance, changing from just cost cutting and debt financing and moving towards kind of digital skills, forward looking. So to Simone's point around being able to not just steer the ship with what's just happened, but actually kind of see what's looking in the future. And then in another interesting point, stakeholder communication. So gathering the information is one part of it, being able to accurately communicate that to the business. And that was, I guess, to Becky's point around, you only become front office or a business partner if you can actually articulate what that actually means in the context of business. You have to understand that you're potentially not dealing with everyone that is a chartered accountant all the time, but actually they work in a finance adjacent function, and there is value that you can drive to them if you can communicate that and articulate that. So I guess, going a little bit off piece, but it'd be good to understand if those kind of new skills are something that you're seeing.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I don't know if either of you want to come in on that. Do your teams have those skills of being able to communicate? Is that something you're having to talk to them, or is it something where the technology is kind of helping, and you're getting reports or analysis which is very easy to digest and very easy to internal sort of communicate on?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because some people, I think, are naturally able to communicate those sorts of things, just depending on how they think about it themselves. And as I sort of alluded to earlier, the exam side of training someone up to be an accountant isn't massively geared towards that yet. I mean, I imagine it would change. So it's definitely something that is trained into people, and some people are just naturally better at it than others. But I think what's really important at the moment is to find individuals that are commercial, so they can see, yes, I am understanding I'm doing finance, but they almost kind of have that customer sat in the chair next to them, and they can think like, what are you seeing? What do you need? And they can always refer it back to the customer, because if they can do that, then they kind of get the wider business anyway. So yeah, it's definitely something. People are just more naturally gifted at it. You know, it's the same as technical skills. You either have it or you work a little bit harder at having it. So it's definitely something that takes a little bit of training a lot of the time. But yeah, it's that commercial side of individuals that I think is really important right now.
Yeah, and I feel like in a particularly competitive environment, like all businesses are operating at the moment, you're competing for what are potentially tighter budgets in some areas. You need to be able to put your commercial hat on, basically, don't you? I mean, would you agree with that, Simone? Anything to add on that? On that?
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think it's really good. You need people who can use a commercial lens and who are curious about all the different levers and mechanics within the business. And I would add to that, I think a lot of those soft skills that are super important in business partnering are learned by osmosis. So, we have a hybrid working arrangement at Forecast where people come in 2 or 3 days a week and work from home a couple of days. So it's a nice balance between sort of not having to travel all the time and being able to maximize days at home to just get stuff done. But you also do need to be around people. You need to be listening to conversations. You need to be having interactions with the business. And those soft skills develop over time by listening to the conversations that other people with more experience are having, and also just getting to know people outside of finance. And you just, you can do it remotely. It's harder. And I think that's a really good reason why both leaders and particularly newly qualified accountants need to spend more time together physically and with the business to the extent that they can.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like you've got a really good balance for that within your organization. Great, thanks very much. It's been super interesting. I wanted to move on to talk a little bit about the future of automation, because clearly, like, elements of business process automation and robotic process automation are, have been in finance and in wider business for a while. But what we've seen, and I can say this with some certainty, as I've written approximately 100 million articles on ChatGPT in the last 6 months, is that AI is very much in fashion at the moment. The sort of growth of artificial intelligence that's been spurred by ChatGPT, and the interest we've seen from that across all business sectors has been incredible. And we're seeing, AI infusing pretty much every tool that we use in our work on a daily basis. So I'm quite interested to know how you think AI and machine learning is going to impact the finance function going forward. I mean, maybe I could go to you first, Simone. What are you expecting to see? How is your organization looking to implement AI, if at all, and what are some of the sort of benefits and challenges for that?
Sure. So interestingly, Forecast was built as an AI native platform like 6 years ago, and all credit to my CEO Dennis, not to me. And so actually, we're sort of lagging on that because our own internal platform does all this amazing stuff with machine learning, and our finance system is good and we automate everything. But I don't think we're on the cutting edge on the finance system, and I think that's probably true at finance systems in general. I think there'll be some players that sort of take the lead, and that's where it's really important to not expect one thing to do everything for your unique business, right? It's absolutely fine to use middleware and add-ons to a system like Sage so that you get exactly what you want, and that's a great fit. And that's where you can also, really lean into to some of the companies that are leading on AI. So I think, if you're curious about that and you think it's going to be time saving, and the businesses at the right size and scale to do it, go for it.
Okay, no, really interesting. And yeah, what do you think, Becky? Do you see the impact of AI on finance being large, and sort of in the short term, how is it gonna influence the profession basically?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's going to go, it's going to get more and more exciting as these things sort of come out and people get a bit braver to use them. But even things like transactions being pulled through from the bank into your software, and it automatically saying like, oh, I think this might be a rent payment or whatever. And, it's clever. It's really it's getting there with learning different transactions of, even things like, oh, you don't usually spend £10,000 on rent, maybe flag this up, have a human brain to look at it. So it's definitely there. It's working well as is, but I do think there's an element of human that needs to come in at every stage. So, the AI is really helpful, but I think it should sort of sit in that helpful box for now. Then we can take it on and say, right, well, what does that mean? So yeah, it's really sort of at every level at the moment. And I know lots of different businesses are using it in different ways. But I would say there's, a bit of tech that everyone's not using currently. So if we can try and get people to use the tech that they've got a little bit more, it'll be really interesting to just train up on those things. And then, I've even seen and heard people using ChatGPT to rewrite emails or to, make visuals look better and things. And I think that is great, as a starting point. And then you can use your time to just add a bit more value to it. But yeah, it's only going to get bigger. It has to.
Yeah. Okay. No, and that's I think it's the kind of theme that's running through a lot of these things. It's that value add that automation can bring, and the way you can use your time better, basically. What I'd be interested to know as well, what are the sort of are your respective like organizations like open to using more AI? Is it sort of when you sort of talk maybe up the food chain a bit in the sort of looking to sort of maybe board and executive level and stuff, are people who are outside of the tech or finance function excited about the potential of using more AI, or is there some kind of reticence there? Simone, I don't know if you've got anything you can add there.
Definitely not, because our whole entire product is predicated on AI. So, and I know we're in the VC technology space, so it's sort of expected. It's just part of the core. They're really looking for efficiencies and return on investment. So, if going for the fancy AI version is going to take a long time to implement, or it's not appropriate to install it, don't do it, right? You don't just have to follow the trend blindly. Do things that make sense for your business at the right time for your business.
Yeah, definitely. Would you agree with that, Becky? It's sort of making sure that it's that it's appropriate and the right time to introduce these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people can get really excited by that shiny new product that they desperately want to implement, but they don't really know why they want to implement it or what exactly it does. So I think if you can start with the end goal, like we want to automate this because that then frees up this person, and we want them to do this instead, then you're going to actually get a lot more out of that software that you do eventually implement. And I think going back to your point about, the CEOs and COOs and that sort of C-suite level of people, do they understand and do they really want this automation and AI in the business? I think they do. I think you just have to sell it to them as the bigger picture and show them how it works and how much time it's going to save and what that equates to in monetary terms or value add. Sometimes, anecdotally, I've heard that they will need to feel the pain before they can see any sort of gain from it. But I think also what we kind of think is these technologies, they're so clever, they're so fast and all of that, and they must be really expensive. And actually, when you drill down into it, you think, oh, why is it so cheap? You expect it to be like £100,000 and it's, 2 or something. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that people are thinking that this must be so expensive when it's not, and that then shifts people's mindsets because they can see the return on investment then too.
Yeah, definitely. I guess like some of that myth busting must be a big part of of your respective roles. Marvin, maybe you can round us out here. What are you? First of all, what we see in the survey when it comes to attitudes to AI and ML, but also what are you seeing in your work from talking to businesses? Is this something which companies are keen to adopt more of, and use the sort of cloud systems that are out there?
Yeah, I think the key kind of trend, or the key starting point for a lot of this is Simone touched on it earlier, that adoption to the cloud. And not just because it's shiny and offers hybrid work, which actually tends to be kind of one of the big things that people tend to be keen on. But actually, again, if we think about the OpEx advantage of cloud, is that you know, rather than paying for this big expensive piece of on-premise kit that you pay for upfront and you build it all yourself, and there's a lot of pain to do it. Cloud is very much quick deployment. You can kind of pick and choose the bits that you need at that particular moment in time. What that means is actually a lot of these cloud applications come with the ability to speak to each other. So what happens is, you can get up and running for a fraction of the cost, to Becky's point just now. Rather than having to pay £100,000 to build this big complicated system, you can probably get 2 or 3 kind of point applications that speak to each other on that basis. So I think that component of the cloud helps this whole adoption to greater automation. What it also does, and I guess if we think about the difference between the likes of Netflix and Amazon Prime versus conventionally buying the individual DVDs and videos and content, is that yes, it might be cheaper because you effectively pay a subscription fee and you get access to hundreds of content. That's one additional benefit of it. The other benefit is actually you farm out the headache of keeping up to track, or keeping kind of up to date with what the right kind of content is and where you should be looking. You farm that out to that provider who is technically an expert, right? I don't necessarily need to be worried that I'm missing the top 1 Korean drama, because actually, if it is that good, it's going to be on a suggestion that comes through on my Netflix and that base. The same is true from a AI perspective, because I think that worries a lot of customers, a lot of finance professionals that are responsible for ultimately the data that's being created. The idea of a system just going ahead and doing it is something that can come with a bit of apprehension. So actually, what our CTO Aaron Harris always says is, every dollar of investment in innovation has to come with a dollar of trust. So every time we think, well, we're going to introduce, I think it was touched on earlier, a feature that allows us to detect anomalies and outliers, so that rent expense that's gone to the wrong account. A lot of that, rather than it just being system's going to go ahead and do it, it gives you review screens, it gives you approvals and delegations, just so there is an element of human judgment that can be applied to it. Because I think that's naturally the biggest apprehension people tend to have around AI and RPA and ChatGPT and generative AI. All those concepts is people just don't like the idea of trusting something that is very important to a system or an application. But actually, if there is that halfway house of review screens, so again, to Simone's earlier point about revenue reconciliation and tracking that, it's great to have a system go ahead and do all of that, but you almost need to build that trust in the bank with the system. So it starts with batch review screens where you're actually looking at it, making sure everything's okay, and then in over time, kind of picking that time to transition to letting the system do it for you. So I think that cloud helps. It means you can adopt slowly and at your own leisure, but then you're effectively paying for not just what the company provides now, but their roadmap. And then that's when you actually see, a lot of those organizations are rolling those things into their roadmaps. You're almost pushing that burden of being up to date to the provider of technology. And they're spent, and again, they can do it at a fraction of the cost because they've got the economies of scale, but also they can do it with the benefit of feedback. So in our case, the feedback of 20,000 customers is useful to identify, when's too much on that basis. So yeah, I kind of agree with all those sentiments. And yeah, it's definitely a journey, but the benefit of the cloud is that you have the peace of mind that the organization that you're speaking to or the technology partner you're working with has considered that, has a plan for that. So you don't necessarily need to.
Yeah, that was the exact word that just came to mind, actually, Marvin. I was thinking the peace of mind that must give you as an end user must be considerable, because these systems have been tested and used and iterated in a positive manner. Well, this has been super interesting. Thank you ever so much, guys. We're going to sort of wrap up now, but I wanted to just ask you before I let you go, if you had any sort of automation strategies or tips for our viewers today that they might be able to take away, maybe an easy win that they can, or something they can go and maybe think about implementing in their teams. So I'll go to you first, Becky, on this one. Any final thoughts on what we've discussed, but also any tips or strategies for automating your finance department?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say dive into the tech that you've already got and see if you're using it to its fullest advantage. And you can do that by reaching out to the company, going on training courses, that sort of stuff, because I'm sure there's probably something in there that people aren't using and that could really help them. And then just secondly, if they then do decide to move on a step and implement something new, always start with what you want to achieve, what's the end goal, because then even talking to the company like Sage, you'll be able to tell them that and they'll have a much better picture of what they're aiming for, and you'll get something much better out at the end.
Thanks. That's really good. And Simone, any final words of wisdom for our viewers before we close out the discussion?
I think that's spot on what Becky said, and I also like to previous phase that you let them feel the pain before they appreciate the gain. And I think as finance leaders, want to foster an environment where the people who are doing the work and experiencing that pain, are encouraged to be curious about different solutions, and that gives them more strings to their bow, helps with retention. They're the people closest to what needs to be remedied through automation. So we don't have to come up with all the ideas by ourselves as finance managers and leaders. Empower the team, create that autonomy, and then things will just really fly.
Yeah, thank you. And Marvin, anything to add before we close out? Any reflections you've got from the discussion today?
Yeah, I think, again, just to echo those points, I like to start with the end in mind, because when we speak to organizations, invariably, sometimes there's so much focus on process. We do this today, it takes X amount of time, it's these steps, can you automate it for me? That's kind of the almost like the technology is a silver bullet that's just going to fix any kind of inefficiencies within a process. And I think sometimes we often rely on technology to do that. But actually, when you start with the end in mind, there may be a chance that there's a slightly more effective out-of-the-box way of getting to that end. And then rather than recreating the same environment in a different system or in a larger system, you actually give yourself the opportunity to learn from how to effectively achieve the same outcome, and it's with a little bit less pain. So I think that start with that in mind is huge. The other piece is, again, almost having an idea of the governance that needs to come with it, because again, even whether we're talking about automation through AI, we're talking about automating kind of standard low-hanging fruit processes, there still does need to be a component of governance that needs to come with that, and having that in the back of the mind on that basis is critical to making this truly scalable. So even if you've got 15, 20, 30 transactions today, when you're looking to build a way of automating that process, be reasonably comfortable that that's going to work when you have 500, 600 transactions, and you're building that governance and that scaling throughout, and also almost leveraging a lot of these tools that you work with, whether it's the finance system or any other finance adjacent applications, have best practice flows. So actually, there's always an argument to identify whether there is a reason why that doesn't necessarily work for your business, and actually almost worth a day one review of, if we were to start today and we didn't have all of these kind of not necessarily misconceptions, but all of these ideas of exactly how things should be done, and we just wanted to achieve X, would this work for us? So I think, there's an element of an open mind around different ways to achieve the same thing. And then again, the more out of the box that you adopt from any technology application, the better off you are, because you effectively save time, but actually ultimately it's often aligned very well, because as you're scaling, you're effectively going down the route that organization going down as well. So I think I definitely would echo that. Start with the end in mind.
Okay, that's going to be my takeaway from this discussion. Start with the end in mind. Well, this has been really interesting. Thank you ever so much, Simone, Becky, and Marvin for joining us today. It's been a great discussion. I really appreciated your time and your insights, and thank you to Sage for your supporting this webinar that we've run at Tech Monitors today. So if you'd like to find out more about the Close the Books survey, which Sage will run with 1,000 industry leaders, you will be emailed with details of how to access that following the webinar, and it's also available online for you to peruse at your leisure. So I think for now, all that remains for me is to say thank you again to all our panelists, and goodbye. All right then. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well done, everybody. Thank you very much.
Good.
No worries.
So yeah, I think Matt, I was just going to say, I think there was one I ummed a bit because I was going to go to Marvin, but then you disappeared for a minute, Marvin. So I was like, let's go to Marvin to talk about AI and ML, and I was like, oh, he's not there. So I don't know if we can edit that. Are you still there, Matt?
Yeah, no, I'm still here. Yeah, absolutely. No, Matt, well handled, and Marvin, well done for getting back on the line so quickly. To be honest with you, it didn't come across
like,
at all that
oh,
long.
Okay, fine.
Just
in my head, I was like,
yeah, no, it really wasn't too bad. I can talk to the video team though if it looks like it's a discernible, kind of pause.
Yeah. Well, if you guys think it's fine, then that's fine. But I was like, oh no.
Yeah, I'll take a look at the recording this afternoon, and we'll go from there, and I'll flag any potential issues to Scott and team as well.
Great.
Yeah, apologies. Not sure what happened there. It just kicked me out.
Yeah, that was right. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm not quite sure either. I wasn't sure, but obviously you're able to join really quick again after, so I'm not quite sure. But apologies, and well handled. And thank you everyone else for participating. I thought that was a really interesting discussion. So thank you.
Thank you.
It was really good.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
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 Hey guys. Bye.
Bye.